Sir, it is visible.
Professor L. Matthew is Professor of Pediatric Pulmonology from PGH Chandigarh. His field of interest are pediatric respiratory diseases, vaccines of public health importance, evidence-based healthcare, and biomedical innovation. Over to the speaker, sir.
Thank you very much, sir. Thank you very much for this kind invitation. I will plunge into the topic straight away. It is about selection of antibiotics in community-acquired pneumonia. Now, I hope this first slide is visible. It is titled Approach. Assuming that we can actually get away from the debate of which child has pneumonia and which child does not have, if we can somehow diagnose pneumonia, then this topic can be broken into 5 subsections, namely, what is the etiology of community-acquired pneumonia in India? Are we able to distinguish bacterial from non-bacterial causes? Which antibiotics should we be using? Do all children need antibiotics? And what do we do for an individual child, which is the focus of pediatricians in office practice? So I'll break each of these down further. Coming to the etiology, microbial etiology of childhood pneumonia in India. Now, thankfully, we have some answers for this. At PJMER, we led the world's single largest study on community-acquired pneumonia etiology. We called it the CAPES study. It ran from 2011 till 2015, over 4 years. We enrolled over 4,000 children, making it the world's single largest study. As we expect, the bulk of the children were in the age group of less than 1 year. About 2/3 comprised that age group. We did include, as per the WHO definition, children with pneumonia, severe pneumonia, and very severe pneumonia, both from the community and from the hospital side. Part of the results were published in 2015, and they're available in open access form. Now, out of these 4,000 odd children, blood culture was positive in only 2 of them, and that is important. When I say 2, I mean 2%. That's about 80 children. Because when blood culture is positive in a child with community-acquired pneumonia, whatever grows there is taken as the etiology in terms of microbe. If we looked at this column, on this middle column that I'm focusing on, which is blood culture, 2% of these 4,000 odd children had positive blood cultures, but the predominant bug there was Staph aureus. 27% of those blood cultures were Staph aureus, followed by Klebsiella pneumoniae and Streptococcus pneumoniae. And then if you looked at the gram negatives together, Kleb pneumoniae, Acinetobacter, Salmonella typhi, etc., together they outnumbered Streptococcus pneumoniae, which suggested for the first time in India that it is probably not strep pneumonia and H influenza which are the dominant bacterial pathogens in blood culture. In contrast, when we looked at the nasopharyngeal aspirate cultures, they were positive in only 14% of the 4,000 odd children. There, the predominant bug was either strep pneumoniae or Haemophilus influenzae with less numbers of Staph aureus and gram negatives. When we looked at viral PCRs in about 45% of these children, about half of the samples showed up positivity for virus, and more than half of those were RSV alone. And if you looked at the first 4 viruses, which are the so-called pneumonia viruses, then together we could identify them in around 2/3 of the cases which were positive for viral PCR. The other predominant bug was rhinovirus, but that we expect to be from the upper respiratory tract, so we don't usually attribute pneumonia etiology to that. And of course, a small smattering of the rest of the viruses was also present. So in summary, depending on how we decided to label etiology, we could find that bacteremia and these pneumonia viruses were present in about 16% of the cases. But if you looked at this overall etiology by multiple ways of classifying, then bacterial we could identify in about 12.5%, whereas viral was about 1.5 times more than that. And we didn't find any difference in the etiology pattern by age of the child, severity, duration of symptoms, etc., except one small signal turned up that children who had wheezing, they ended up more likely to have RSV. So in 2015, we knew for our country that viruses dominate in the etiology of childhood pneumonia, and Streptococcus pneumoniae is not as frequent as is led to be believed. We extended this study further with the CAPES version 2, wherein we looked at children only with severe and very severe pneumonia. And we looked at samples in addition to blood and nasopharyngeal aspirate. So where possible, we collected direct lung aspirate, bronchoalveolar lavage, pleural fluid, sputum, etc. And then we made an etiology model hierarchy. We had 3 models of etiology assignment, what are called the liberal model, the conservative model, and an in-between kind of a model, wherein for each sample that we took from a particular site, we decided to include or exclude certain organisms as pathogenic or otherwise. So anything we got in direct lung aspirate, bile, or pleural fluid was taken as pathogenic, whereas in blood, the doubtful bugs like Staph hominis and Staph epidermidis were excluded in model 2, and certain other viruses were excluded in model 3 because they could be the upper respiratory viruses. So we were able to construct three models of etiology, and this is important because we looked at a bunch of 26 pathogens, and we also looked at mycoplasma and chlamydophila in this. This slightly confusing chart is what came out of this particular study. So if you look at the bottom, these three bars represent the three etiology assignment models. And within each assignment model, it shows the percentage or frequency of specific organisms. So if you looked at strep pneumoniae, whatever etiology assignment model we use, you can only see a very small, thin greenish bar at the top over here. And that contributes to less than 2 or 3% of the total cases of childhood pneumonia, where organisms could be recovered. Similar is true for H. influenzae, same small little thing, whereas Staph aureus seems to be slightly more robust in size compared to these two. And then we have gram negatives, which are in these blue bars. But the predominant organism you will see is this yellow section over here. In all these three charts, the yellow predominates, and that yellow is RSV. And then, of course, we have a little bit of influenza and a little bit of Boca virus and other viruses. And combinations of bacteria and viruses shown by these pink, they also are there in much more frequency than strep pneumonia or H. influenza. Mycoplasma pneumonia, because we did only serologies for them, and very few turned out to be PCR positive. So in the conservative model, you see that less than 1% is actually Mycoplasma pneumonia. If you looked at etiology assignment by these three models that I just talked about, liberal, intermediate, and conservative, and you broke it down to how many had bacterial, how many had viral, how many had those atypical bugs, how many had mixed, which means more than one kind of organism, and how many we could not determine the etiology. Again, you'll see that this red section predominates in each of these three bars, and that red represents viruses. So I think, again, we had confirmation that even in hospitalized children, the viral etiology outnumbers the bacterial etiology, and among them, the single most important virus is the RSV, with the rest of the viruses forming smaller proportions of etiology. Then recently, in 2017, the ICMR decided to start off a multicentric study in a case control model looking at 1100 children with pneumonia and 1100 children who are healthy controls from 5 centers across the country, namely CMC Vellore, PGI Chandigarh, KGMU Lucknow, KEM Pune, and NICD Kolkata. And now that the results are just coming out, I label this study as the EPIC study, as the etiology of child pneumonia in Indian children. It's really an epic study because a lot of effort has gone in. Now, out of these 1100, PGIMER contributed 314 cases and equal number of controls. So we were the site with the largest number of cases and controls. And this is what the data looked like. Out of these 314 cases, and I can only show you the Chandigarh data because since the rest of the data is not published, we can't disclose it before the publication comes out. So out of these 314 cases, about 5% had a blood culture positivity. Those are these 18. But if you looked at it age-wise from 1 to 5-month-olds, less than 1-year-old, 1 to 2-year-olds, and more than 2-year-olds, what you see is that the blood culture is very, very infrequently positive. In fact, out of these 18 blood culture positives also, Staph hominis, which may or may not be a pathogen, turned out to be there in half of them. So if you exclude those and you exclude Staph hemolyticus, then really we are left with very small handful of bacteria in the blood cultures. But we didn't see any Streptococcus pneumoniae, no H. influenzae, one Staph aureus, and one Salmonella, etc., etc. When we looked at the comparison of the nasopharyngeal aspirate culture and PCR studies for bacteria and viruses, in 314 cases, we had 312 isolates, and among 314 controls, we had about 250 isolates. If you looked at the comparison between these red bars and these green bars, the red bars represent the cases, the green bars represent the controls, and the numbers on the y-axis represent the total number of samples which were positive. So you can clearly see strep pneumoniae more in the controls, Haemophilus influenzae almost equal, Staph aureus again little more in the controls, Moraxella catarrhalis similar, other gram-negative organisms again more in the controls. But the big difference that came out was that RSV was much more frequently found in the cases than in the controls. Likewise, influenza, para-influenza, human metapneumovirus, etc. But the absolute numbers themselves may not mean much because the denominator for the cases is 312. The denominator for the controls is about 250. So we looked at odds ratios, and the single pathogen which stood out with significant odds ratios was RSV, which means if RSV is picked up in a child with pneumonia, it is about 7 times more likely that it is pathogenic as compared to controls. On the other hand, when you looked at the odds ratios for strep pneumonia and Staph aureus, it seemed to be the other way around, identifying either of these two bugs in the nasopharynx of a child with pneumonia more likely to be a control than to be a case. For the rest of the organisms, even though the signals looked good, there was no statistically significant difference between cases and controls. Now, this is across the bunch of 314 cases and controls as a whole. So we broke this thing by age groups, and then this is what we found. There were children less than 6 months old, about 131 cases and 131 controls. So if you looked at this, again, you see that the RSV bar is the most significant one. And here, look at the odds ratios. It has gone up from 7 point something to 9.3, which means the child is much more likely to be pathogenic RSV than control RSV. In terms of strep pneumonia, now there is no difference. Staph aureus, again, there seems to be more in the control group. In the infants between 6 and 12 months of age, of which there were 87 in each group, again, the only statistically positive significant signal came up for RSV with an odds ratio of 13, and both sides of the confidence interval being more than 1. Everything else, even though there were small numbers which were more in the case group, for example, Staph aureus and H. influenzae and even influenza virus and PIV, statistically it was not different. So only RSV turned out to be the important bug. In children who are between the ages of 1 and 2 years, of which there were 63 cases and 63 controls, we can see that the bars are almost similar for everything, even though influenza and RSV look slightly more prominent here. But in terms of statistical significance, there was no difference between cases and controls, which means to suggest that if we picked out one of these organisms, it would be very hard for us to know whether it came for a case or for a control. And in children beyond the age of 2 years, which means 2 to 5 year olds, of which there were 33 in each group, you can see now that the bars are almost equal in size, except for RSV and influenza. But you should remember that the denominator is smaller for the control group. So statistically, there was no significant difference again. In other words, in young infants, we expect that RSV would be the main etiology. For other age groups, it is very hard to say whether any of the organisms that we recover from the nasopharynx is actually pathogenic or it is simply standing there as a commensal or a bystander in a child who's having pneumonia. Now, having led to this confusing conclusion that it is very hard to make out what causes pneumonia in children except in young infants, the question comes, can we distinguish bacterial from non-bacterial causes of pneumonia? And when we looked at our CAPES data in about 2,300 odd cases, we looked at a bunch of risk factors, clinical risk factors, severity risk factors, some examination findings, etc. The only thing we found, if a child was exposed to overcrowding at home, his likelihood of having bacterial pneumonia was lower than being viral. And interestingly, children with exposure to tobacco smoke at home were much more likely to have viral, and among them RSV again. But nothing else made any difference. Wheezing, presence or absence, the type of X-ray, these things were not distinguishing bacterial from viral pneumonia. And in the severe and very severe cases, as I mentioned in CAPES 2, we also looked at some lab parameters. The total and differential counts did not differentiate. The WHO classing of X-rays did not differentiate. The presence of wheeze or crackles could not distinguish. CRP and procalcitonin were higher in the children labeled as bacterial pneumonia, but there was no cutoff value beyond which we could confidently say this is bacterial, below which it is viral. So it is a soft pointer, but definitely not a diagnostic tool to distinguish bacterial from viral. In this study, we also looked at various chemokines which could act as biomarkers. So we looked at 22 in all. 6 of them showed some positive signals, so we explored them in greater detail. And only 2 stood out. Interleukin 6 was higher in bacterial pneumonia across all the etiology assignment models that I talked about. And IL-8 in one particular model was slightly higher. And we found that if you attributed an IL-6 value of more than 1,000, then we had a 70% chance of picking up bacterial from viral. Now, please recall that this IL-6 studies were done in about 2015-16, much before the pandemic brought in IL-6 into focus as a marker of, the haywire run amok inflammation which is happening in relation to COVID. So all we could say is that elevated IL-6 and IL-8 point towards bacterial etiology. To some extent, it makes sense because it comes from the neutrophils, but COVID has taught us that this can happen in viral pneumonias as well. So I don't think any biomarker in today's day can successfully distinguish bacterial from viral pneumonia. In other words, no clinical marker, no lab parameter, no X-ray finding, No risk factor or demographic parameter and no biomarker can foolproof tell us which child is bacterial and which child is viral. Although we can get a smell that there is likelihood being greater in a bunch of children, for an individual child, we really cannot predict that. Which therefore brings us to question number 3. If that is the case, that the etiology seems to be predominantly viral, some children have bacterial and we don't know which. Now, what antibiotics to use? For this, I don't have my own primary research, so I have to fall back on published research. This is a chart which comes from the WHO after the reclassification in 2014. And from the original classification of pneumonia, severe pneumonia, and very severe pneumonia, they just have two categories. One is pneumonia with chest indrawing. The other is severe pneumonia, which is basically pneumonia with those danger signs that we're familiar with. And they have based their recommendations on evidence which comes from field trials in Kenya and other places, Pakistan especially. And their treatment regimen is for pneumonia, amoxicillin at 80 milligram per kg per day for 5 days. If a child undergoes treatment failure at any time during or after the therapy, he goes to the hospital. For severe pneumonia, we straight start with antibiotics, which are injectable, and the dictum is to use ampicillin or benzyl penicillin in these dosages for 5 days, added with gentamicin in this particular dosage. And the rationale is that gentamicin is supposed to cover against Staph aureus. If a child shows signs of treatment failure, we escalate to ceftriaxone. Now, there are some dictum in this wherein some variation is permissible. If a child is severely malnourished and still has only pneumonia, clinicians would usually try to treat as severe pneumonia because some signs of severity get masked in them. Children who are immunocompromised, of course, don't fall into this group. Children who are HIV positive and suffering from community-acquired pneumonia, we might need to individualize their therapy. And depending on the sensitivity pattern for Staph aureus in local places, this gentamicin might get replaced by amikacin or something stronger. What you see from this chart is basically that it is the basic antibiotics which are evidence-based. There is enough evidence to show that we can continue to use them. There is absolutely no need to escalate to what are called higher antibiotics or stronger antibiotics or antibiotics which are targeted for specific organisms, especially those which are resistant to common drugs. Now, fourth question is slightly trickier to answer, and that is, should all these children receive antibiotics or can we leave some children without antibiotics, wait and watch and see what happens? I think there are 4 treatment options which I have put here. The first is, yes, we should treat them all, because since we can't predict who has bacterial, so we'll have to treat them all in order that the bacterial ones get some kind of treatment. Conservatives might say that no, it is not a good idea because antibiotics have both side effects, cost effects, and they increase antimicrobial resistance in the community. So we should judiciously target antibiotics to those children who are more likely to have bacterial. A third group might say that, I would like to decide based on the circumstances of individual patients. If I'm reasonably confident the child has viral, I might withhold antibiotics. And a fourth group, which I guess is the majority, would think that I will send off a nasopharyngeal swab, do some rapid PCR from these commercially available kits, look at the organism, and then decide on antibiotics. Now, each of these options seems to be justified except the fourth one, because I've just proved to you from the previous slides that nasopharyngeal swabs are unreliable for pneumonia etiology. If you pick a bug, you wouldn't know whether that is the cause of the pneumonia, and basing treatment decisions on that alone might not be a very wise idea. But the choice of options A, B, and C are quite reasonable. Now, the problem is when you try to decide which child should be given antibiotics, that is easy, but which child should not be given antibiotics, that is where the tricky challenge lies, because there is no reliable way to distinguish children with pure viral pneumonia from bacterial. There is no idea to predict which child will go into treatment failure and have complications if we didn't treat children with antibiotics upfront. Although there is literature which shows that in children with severe pneumonia, even if they were not treated with antibiotics, they seem to do reasonably well. But the problem is that is looking at a bunch of children. We are interested in an individual child. So for an individual child, it is difficult to predict whether or not he will undergo treatment failure. Again, if we chose not to use antibiotics and children had bacterial pneumonia, would they worsen by developing pleural effusion and empyema, etc.?
Excuse me, Professor Matthew, we have only 2 more minutes, sir.
That's perfect, sir. That is perfect. And finally, we have no way to predict which child with a viral illness will have a superadded bacterial infection and confuse the picture further. Now, dealing with individual children, I think the algorithm would be, am I confident that this child has a viral pneumonia? If yes, don't treat. If no, you would treat with antibiotics. Then the next question would be, since we know what antibiotics to use, the question to ask ourselves is my local sensitivity pattern definitely different from what has been shown by the WHO? If yes, treat accordingly. If the etiology could be Staph aureus based on risk factors like pyoderma or pneumatoceles, fluoxetine might be a good idea. Atypical microorganisms, thankfully, are not a big problem in our country. Less than 1% has mycoplasma. So there is absolutely no pressure to use azithromycin. In fact, we should desist from using it because it might be the last resort for resistant Salmonella typhi. Can I defer starting antibiotics till culture is available? It's a tricky question. We would start probably with treatment and then remove it if the culture is negative. And should we send specimens for PCR analysis? Definitely not nasopharyngeal aspirates that don't help in any way. BAL, if it is possible, at the beginning of illness might help. So to conclude, coming back to the question that I posed in the beginning and the 5 questions that I talked about, the etiology in India is predominantly viral. RSV dominates. Strep pneumonia is not as important as an organism as we formerly thought. Unfortunately, we can't distinguish bacterial from other causes. But if we were giving antibiotics, amoxicillin for outpatients, ampicillin plus gentamicin for inpatients, ceftriaxone could be the backup. Not all children need antibiotics, but it's very hard to identify which one. And the principles for an individual child that you and I are interested in is actually pretty similar to the group of children on an epidemiologic basis. On that note, I will stop my presentation. Thank you very much for your patient listening.
Thank you very much, Professor Joseph Matthew, for giving